Welcome back to the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth in successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you've found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falash, and the Group Practice Accelerator podcast is on the air. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today because we've got some valuable takeaways to share and you'll want to take some notes during today's episode. But before I get to why, just a quick reminder that the Polaris team will be holding a free pre-conference workshop with cocktails in Philadelphia at the American Academy of Orthodontics meeting that you won't want to miss. The AAO is a worthwhile show to attend for sure, and it runs from April 24th through the 27th. And our free workshop will be on Thursday, the 24th. Again, it's a pre-conference workshop. And it's going to be held at the Convention Center in room 201B. So please make sure you register in advance. You know, I've mentioned in prior episodes that the workshop is intended to be interactive. So please bring your questions. It's meant to be a dialogue. And it's designed to provide you with an action plan on how to get the highest value from your business. And that's whether you're looking to drive growth or whether you're looking to exit. So to reserve your seat for the free workshop, please register by visiting polarishealthcarepartners.com/AAO. All right, on to today's topic. As you know by now, Polaris launched a hands-on, on-site clinical coaching program early this year. And recently, we're having a lot of conversations with clients and listeners on the mentorship that our docs provide and how that supports the growth of your business. Because the reality is, by building incredible doctors with the skills and confidence they need to deliver a higher level of dentistry and stay with you, we're by default building your business. We could no doubt fill an episode just about every week answering that listener question. So instead, we're breaking that path down into smaller bites. So keeping the how in mind, people want to know where to start, and we can certainly help with that. Well, if you listen to any recent episodes with our Polaris clinical coaches, you're already aware of their respective successes, and both will tell you that directly related and really at the foundation of their successes has to be standardization. But what does that mean? What's the necessary scope that we're looking for to facilitate success? And how does mentorship intertwine with implementation to really drive home standardization within our businesses to make success a virtual inevitability? Well, here with me today behind the mic to explain is my teammate, Dr. Steve Giannoutsos, who's going to provide us with exactly that scope in the form of 4 meaningful outcomes of standardization through mentorship. Steve, welcome back to the show.
Amy, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here to talk to you guys today.
Perfect. We're excited to talk to you, and I'm ready to get to this topic because I know a lot of our listeners have been asking about it. So where do they start? So you and I talked about before recording here today that there are some really meaningful outcomes that come from standardizing things within our practices. And we know there's not a one size fits all, but we do know that standardization is going to improve our business, our clinical skills. But we always want to measure that, of course, and we need proof that it works. So keeping that standardization and those processes in mind, can you tell us, what does that mean? What are we referencing? Are we talking about like skill set and scope? When we discussed this, we talked a little bit about the fact that it isn't just the clinical piece, it's the admin piece as well.
Yeah, standardization is one of those things that is boring but exciting. And it's exciting because it envelops the entirety of the profession, of any profession for that matter, and obviously specifically for dentistry. What you and I were discussing earlier before we got on the air is that when we talk about the standardization within specifically a dental practice, we're talking about every step of the way, from the way that a phone is answered, the way a patient is greeted in the office, how the office looks, all the way through till the patient leaves and the lights are closed. And when you create, we'll be repeating these words, standard and processes kind of throughout this talk today. When you create real dependable processes and you standardize them, and everyone mentors everyone, it starts from the top down and from the bottom up, there's a certain comfort that everyone feels because it's dependable. And we're going to go into a few of them together, obviously, but there is nothing that is left out. There is nothing that isn't worthy of being thought about, considered, and standardized so that everyone can depend on a process, no matter how new or old they are within a group.
Well, good. Well, let's get to it then. How about that first process? When you and I were talking, we discussed that it starts with the intake or the consult. How do we improve there? Can you give us some guidance on some of the aspects of how mentorship can be critical in that space?
Yes, I just want to touch on something that leads to that
Sure.
before there's an intake done, if possible. And that is, and I touched on it just earlier, every part, whether it is the way that our team posts a job, the way that an interview is conducted, how we deal with vendors, the process of moving a patient from, and this leads to the intake, from marketing, which is a call to action through the website, SEO, or whatever the process is, through till that phone call. Even within that, we've got processes. And otherwise, you're just depending on everyone to do their best. It's their best on that day, right? And so we want to just make sure that there's a little bit of an outline that everyone can follow. On process number one of the four that we're going to discuss today, which is intake, what is really the intake? The intake is the interaction that someone, your call center, your front desk, your patient contact specialist, which is who we call them, someone has to take a call or a query from a patient who's seeking care or a consult for care. And so we've all had this experience. We'll call somewhere and it goes silent. We'll call somewhere and we hear the clinking of the keyboard in the background, other phones ringing, but we don't really get this kind of personalized attention. And so we want to make sure that everybody who reaches out to us, and certainly when there's a human to human contact, that is standardized. Because the intake, the way that a patient is taken from telephone call to having their butt in a chair in a consult room, that is huge. And what allows them to feel comfortable and confident in that office is very important. And how your people deal with them is very important. So we have a very simple thing. We have an intake form. Right? Again, boring but exciting because patients will ask questions that are relevant and important to them. How do you take that individual and express to them that they are the most important thing happening to you at that time as a front desk patient contact specialist, but also get all the information you need so that they can have a meaningful visit? And then how do you address the various challenges that they have? Some people are exceedingly busy and cannot come in. In cases like that, we may, and orthodontics is unique in that it can do this more than other professions, we may set up a virtual consult. Others travel so much or they have such restrictions on their schedule that they need to be seen immediately because there's very rarely, at least in orthodontics, an emergency, right? In my colleague Dr. Vivek Solanki's realm of practice in periodontics and surgery and super GP world, that's a little different. Those are real emergencies. But again, knowing how to deal with every aspect of this for the patient. So we think that's critically important. We understand what the patient needs and wants and will benefit from. And we help to create an outline for our people to ask the right questions, reassure, and get them in with the right clinician, in the right office if we have more than one office, at the right time. And then one final thing is all of that information that is above and beyond the simple intake. For example, there's a mom who's a working mom who's very busy and she's interested in doing something that is removable like Invisalign. That's easy. or there's someone who's had failed jaw surgery. Those two things are exceedingly different and require different levels of concern and consideration. So intake, huge.
Absolutely. And layering on that, it matters how we answer the phone. It matters how we greet people in the office. And I don't care if that's a sales rep or a patient, because everybody sees how you interact with everyone else. And that impacts how patients see you when they're sitting in the waiting room. It tells them, how am I going to be treated when I'm sitting in the chair? So these are all considerations. And I love a good SOP. I love a good process. So having these behaviors, I'll call them, laid out not only gives something that you mentioned before called comfort, because people know how to do their jobs when we outline it for them. And that's not that they don't bring their uniqueness to it, but it's, here's the guidelines that we follow, because this helps the patient know what to expect at the end of the day. And the patient's what drives your business. And when we humanize that contact and personalize the experience, you're building trust. You're building lifetime patience. And that's really the outcome, isn't it?
Absolutely. And when they come into our professional homes or call our professional homes, we want to make sure that they feel like they're welcomed and valued guests in our homes. And we've all heard the adage of how someone treats the waiter or someone helping them gives you a lot of information into what kind of person they really are. I just want to give a big shout out to all of the people who answer phones and work in call centers and work as patient care specialists. And I want to say something. For a long time, I admittedly am guilty of not having valued them. And I've got to say, I was wrong in that. They are the first and last impression that is made. And if you think about an experience that you have somewhere special, Disney, the Mandarin Oriental, the Four Seasons, the Amman resorts, where people will greet you and make you feel special and build that trust. That's exactly what we want with every patient interaction. And that's what we try to give them. We give them the tools to be able to deliver that level of care and engagement.
That's right. And they really do deserve the accolades that they don't get, because they are, like you said, the first and last impression, and it has a huge impact on whether patients return to your practice. All right. So, second process of standardization. Let's talk about standardizing doctor and staff experiences within the practice.
Doctor and staff experiences within the practice are a place that I have failed, and you hear me talk about that a lot. And it's a place that's I'm very passionate about now. So specifically for the docs who work with us, docs, staff, we have to get to a place where, much like with our patient care specialists, there is a wealth of information and education that they have so they can provide things that are required. Right? A clarity on the expectations, but a support throughout. So specifically when it comes to the doctors, you'll hear a and actually you'll hear everyone talk about how they mentor doctors. And mentorship has often consisted primarily of something like this. Hello, Dr. Jamie. I see that you didn't close this case or leave this patient satisfied. And then some level of maybe critique, right? Some level of almost a slap on the wrist. And then we move on. We miss an opportunity to really explain to the docs, and I'm oversimplifying and using one example, but we miss an opportunity to really engage them as partners in the process. So it's really about expressing our vision. It's something I talked about in the last podcast, and having that through the clinical mentorship with the docs be expressed and ultimately be the Bible, what we work our outline and we work for as we interact with our patients.
That to me, when I look at that from my clinical days, when we do everything the same way, even from clinician to clinician, it provides not only stability in the practice, but again, stability from the patient, because if I look at it from a patient perspective and I have a favorite clinician because they do something a certain way or I love the care that they give and they leave the practice, there's a good chance I'm going to leave the practice with them. That's a problem, right? That's going to impact your production at the end of the day because we know right now we have shortages all over the place. So standardizing that care, I think, can be a critical piece.
Big time. There was a clinician who used to teach at the dental school, orthodontics. His name was Wick Alexander. And his process, and this is something we do in the orthodontic practices because we deal with parents and patients. And he used to say that he worked head of the chair, foot of the chair. And he had referenced one time, and I'll elaborate on that in a moment. He had referenced one time, I believe it's the Maasai. There's a tribe in Africa where the greeting when someone walks in is, I am here. And the rebuttal is, I see you. And it's a powerful statement because we all want to be where we think we are needed or where we think we want to be. And we all want to be seen. Our doctors, our patients, our parents. So the way that we work with the docs is a lot like a checklist that you do on an airplane. We have a real regimented, scripted way that every clinician is able to interact with every either patient or an orthodontics patient and parent that they encounter so that they address the head of the chair. The head of the chair is that patient with his or her mouth and their set of orthodontic or dental problems. And the foot of the chair is often a parent, but it can be a sibling, it can be a spouse, it can be a caretaker. So we make sure that they're all seen. We make sure that we address the head and the foot of the chair. And we give them, I'll call it a script and curriculum, something to help guide them as clinicians when they interact with patients in educating on the details of the problem that a patient presents with, articulating high level what they think needs to be done and how it can be done, and then ultimately moving to execution, which is a later part of a process. And even along that way, you can imagine like you're on a highway, there's multiple different exits where people can get on and get off, right? People finish treatment early, finish treatment late. There's complexities that come up, interdisciplinary care, and so forth. So we help them throughout all of that. And I'll give a small little, a clinician I worked with, Dr. Nick in New Jersey, taught me this. When we sit down with a patient in orthodontics, we don't want people to imagine what's happening in their mouth. So we do two things. First, we give them a big mirror, big patient mirror. We lay them back and we walk them through their mouth. And we'll say something as simple as this tooth is in, this tooth is out, this tooth is rotated, here you have a space, and so forth. And we'll show them their bite. That's the first thing we do. The second thing we do is that we'll have our treatment coordinator take intraoral and extraoral pictures, and we'll have those printed. This little pearl for the orthodontic practices that might be listening. A lot of people do this, but we overdo it, and I think it helps patients. We then sit across from them. So we've eliminated that hierarchical challenge, doctor to clinician, and talk to them in a little bit more informal way with their pictures in front of them. And we walk them through their mouth again while they're able to look at both the pictures on a screen and the pictures on a printout, which is what they take with them when they leave the office. So that's a simple example of the type of things someone could do. And there's a lot of details around it that I've left out for the sake of some brevity here that can be done in orthodontics to walk people through virtually through their mouth. Not much different from what we would do with an intraoral camera if somebody came in with a broken down tooth that required either crown or removal and implant replacement. But that's step number one in the chair at consult. And we have a mentorship and clinical curriculum process for every step of the way from records being obtained to retainers being placed for orthodontic patients.
Sure, and there's so much that goes into that. Again, we wouldn't have time to cover it today or in maybe even an episode a week. There's a lot involved, but I really love that you framed it as a curriculum because truly it's an education for the clinician that's providing care. It provides an education for whoever is in the room with that patient and their parent, sibling, whoever it may be. Because isn't it funny how when you walk someone through their issues in the way that you just described, their treatment plan becomes that much more powerful because they're a part of that process now. And I really feel like that we lose patients throughout the treatment process if they don't quite understand the importance of what we're doing for them. And if we don't close these cases, if we don't complete treatment, how are we really driving growth in the business? I mean, patient care aside, I mean, that's critical. Our mission here is to tie that with the growth of a business. So if we're not providing that education, we're not streamlining curriculum, we're not going to get the outcomes that we need. All right. So, next process of the four. This one, we're going to standardize processes that improve culture in an organization. How do we do that?
This is definitely the most challenging, and I think you touched on something earlier where you alluded to the lack of personnel. It's never been more critical to attract, retain, build, and support all of your people. But also, while you're doing that, filtering out those people who don't fit well within what it is that you've envisioned building. It's a really, really, really hard thing to do. And again, I know this because there have been instances where I've failed to do this. We've failed to do this. I think whenever you look at a practice or a group that has a real solid culture, and we'll talk about what my definition of that is, and I think most of our listeners would share that definition, you find that the secondary benefit is that the practice's success is evident. It's there in terms of its growth, in terms of attracting other people, good people. So, starting on the culture, I would just want to touch on and put a pin on the fact that the best we can do, we must do. If we can build a culture where all of our people understand our vision, right? Because a vision is not just, I want to build something and sell it. That's an ultimate goal in the end. But while I'm living in it, the goal is to sometimes help create wealth for some of your people, the doctors, the people on the admin side in the org structure who have been instrumental in building that practice. You want to create an environment that recruits on its own, where the employees, the staff that are with you, they see that you're committed to your community. You're committed to building them, to giving them the skills that they need. When you say, as many organizations say, there's room for growth in here, that's a lot like when we say there's mentorship for docs and all we do is critique sometimes. What are we doing to help grow their clinical skills, make them super docs and so forth? Well, we need to do the same with our admin and clinical non-doc folks, as well as with our docs. So you know when you walk into a place and everyone is hitting on, at the same wavelength and firing on all cylinders. Hugely important. And it's one of those things that's hard because it's soft. It's hard because it's soft.
Yeah.
It isn't an easy thing to build. You have to live it. Your people know if you don't live it authentically, and it erodes their trust in you. And it's probably the thing that if you have and you built it solidly, everything else can come from it. And so I will admit that this is the hardest thing to do. But again, when you have that curriculum and you have that process about everything from the way that you hire, so you onboard somebody in a way that's predictable, not just for them, but for the people around them, people who've been there for a while. When you offboard somebody, people leave because they've grown, right? Sometimes they leave because you fail to help execute their growth, right? All of that, everyone is watching. And so We really work hard to make sure they know our mission statement, they know what we want a day to look like, what we want a week to look like. We've gotten to a place where, and this is one of the things we build, where we're not solving for today, even though today's issues are always addressed. We're literally looking out 2, 3 quarters, maybe a year. Again, as I speak to you today, we're well into the end of the calendar year and beginning of the new year, 2026. Those are the initiatives we're working on now with the team.
I love a good strategic plan. You have to get out ahead of
Yes.
it. Yeah, 6, 9 months minimum. So I love to hear that you're doing that, and I'm not surprised at all. But I wanna go back to something you said about the culture has to be evident. It does. And when it is, and knowing this is always gonna change along the way, there are adjustments and staffing changes, but you've gotta nurture it and protect it most importantly. With recruitment and retention being such a huge widespread pain right now throughout healthcare, culture is critical. So if you've got one toxic employee that's rocking the boat, no matter how talented they are or with the best intentions that they have, changes have to be made. You have to take care of the issue to protect your culture. You lose a doc or someone that's going to impact your production or your patient retention, that's a huge issue. So finding ways to put a process in place that you stick to in terms of culture and how people deal with each other, deal with patients, just how they interact as a business and how you manage people, that's critical. And you made some wonderful points there about how you manage people from income to on their way out the door. Maybe it's time for them to spread their wings elsewhere. That same process has to be smooth and it's got to be positive.
Yes, I want to say 2 things about that before we move on to the next part of our conversation. I mentioned the mission statement, and one of the things that I think about a lot about clinical care in general is that often as a clinical business, as an enterprise grows, there's an inordinate amount of time spent on things like marketing, continued growth of top line and revenue, de novo build outs, acquisitions, things like this. Then everyone moves into becoming a little bit more entrepreneurial, EBITDA, etc. And I've never lost sight of the fact that everything we do, hope to do, plan to do, transact on, everything comes from the clinical care that we deliver.
Exactly.
All those dollars, everything we do comes from that. And that's why critical in our mission statement is the fact that we're there to serve patients. And secondarily and equally, we're there to help our people grow. One of the things that we do, I think, has just worked wonders for our culture because it's tough. It's tough now that we're all short on people. It's tough because there's always someone who's difficult or a wonderful person who's going through something. And what we do is we have this cadence that's ongoing, constant, and again, predictable, where they're given feedback. No one in the organization currently is unsure of where they stand. People are much more comfortable hearing the bad and knowing rather than wondering. Because when they wonder, they're put in a place of anxiety, and anxiety is fear of the unknown.
Right.
And that makes everyone insecure. We like to be able to have things be a little bit more tangible. So we set the expectations. We let them know what training is going to be like, let them know what feedback is going to be like and how that cadence is going to be set. And then we follow through and we ask them to be accountability partners with us. We tell them you should expect to have ongoing weekly meetings and monthly meetings and quarterly meetings with the various members of your team. If you don't, we ask you to request that because things come up. Sometimes people are out, right? And so we just make sure that they get that. And along with that, they're given, again, the feedback that they need, what they need to improve on, and their path for growth so that we recruit the right people, we build them to be the best version of themselves so they can grow within the organization, and help us. And then if they get to a place where either they don't fit well within that current culture or they're going on to other things, different, bigger, better, we want that process to be a process where they're integral in bringing someone new, someone wonderful like them into the mix. True for admin, true for people at the C suite, and definitely true for the clinicians, for the docs.
We keep going back to two words here: predictability and comfort. It seems like both have to exist for every process that we've talked about. We're not even finished yet. So, so with that, our last process, number 4, we're looking to build. We're looking to build and sell. We're looking to sell. Let's explore that a little bit. How do we implement standardization there?
I think we did a great job of getting to this point because all of the other things we talked about are part of that foundation that allow you to get to thinking about your enterprise as something bigger. Again, understanding that at the absolute footings, the foundation of that is your patients, the patient care, and then the way that the team feels around that. And we deviated a little bit and talked about some of the other more equally important but different things. When we start to talk about processes for expansion or transaction, I want to give an example that hopefully resonates with everyone. It has to do with your home. You and I talked about this. Before you sell a home, and we're obviously the last few years living in this very unique real estate environment that makes no sense for a variety of reasons. But again, the process around that has always been make the home pretty, get it valued by your real estate professional, and then sell it. And hopefully the market agrees with your evaluation. And if they don't, hopefully the market believes that it's worth more than you thought it was worth. And oftentimes, what people would do, I did this with the home I sold, is they'll fix a bathroom, a kitchen, spend a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of time, maybe the landscaping, pretty it up. And they'll do that for the prospective buyer. The irony around that experience is they will spend time, money, effort, and heartache to create this presumed beauty that will be appreciated, hopefully, by someone who will see that value and pay a premium for it. And they will never have enjoyed, or they would not have enjoyed their home as much as they could have. What does that have to do with the practices? Well, if you do all these things we've talked about, if you create a path for a patient from call intake to retention in orthodontics, or from phone call through till moving away to Florida with their all on X, as Dr. Solanki does, right? If you've created that process, if you've helped your docs to understand how to interact with patients, how to move through treatment plans, how to execute, if you've built your culture, then by the time you get to the place where you're thinking about expanding or transacting, everything that you've needed to do to have the highest enterprise value or potential for enterprise value, you've done. And you are set up for success. So whether you're looking to do a cap raise, right? And for those who are listening who don't know what that is, you might need to raise some dollars on a delayed draw term loan from a lender so that you can finance your expansion or acquisition plans, right? Whether you're looking to think about selling all or part of your practice, whether you're looking to potentially do a JV, a joint venture with someone who wants to move in and use your platform as their way in. If you've done the stuff for mentorship for your docs and your clinical staff, if your patients are happy, if your culture is good, there is no question that it'll be easy to transact. There is no question that you will attain the highest value possible. And then, and this is what's beautiful, even after you transact, because there's a lot of earnouts, there's all these stories about groups that have set valuations for docs and then rolled equity over that wasn't realized. And some of that we can argue was done perhaps with a little bit of a euphoria in the markets that has come back to earth. But a lot of that was probably not executed as it should have been because all of these other things weren't in place. So if you use the right experts to implement these proven processes, again, I'm repeating the same words because boring is exciting. It's the truth,
True.
right? You're set up for that success in any way you need to or would like to transact. And I want to say one final thing because I might be rambling a little bit. Wouldn't it be a wonderful success story if you built a lot like that home? You built your practice to sell, right? That's a common theme. There's a lot of books, build to sell, right? Build to sell, which means you're humming, firing on all cylinders. The practice is performing well. You're doing well in terms of your work life balance as an owner doctor. Your doc partners are doing well. There's room for your clinical team to grow. You're doing all this stuff. If you choose to sell, you will get top valuation possible for the marketplace at that time. And if you don't, then you can hold on to your practices and continue to grow, right? You've built a life that you do not need to or want to retire or vacation from. And I've said that in previous podcasts. That's the point of utilizing the right clinician consultants to help you.
100% agree. And why not get the right resources, the right tools, the right experts, and enjoy it? Like you said, you've built it. It's not like people one day go, "Oh, I think I'll be a dentist," and they don't love dentistry. I don't think it's very common to find someone that chooses this profession, but doesn't enjoy patient interaction, providing care, and all that goes into that. So, yes, it makes perfect sense to get the right experts in place and really build this business and standardize it and optimize it to the point where it's working for you. It's working for your lifestyle. It's working for your family. It's working for your financial health. And you really are loving what you do again. So, with that, and I know you've had extreme success with what you've built, can you share a story with us where you saw these standardizations really have an impact on a group or a practice?
Yes. And I'll make this a little briefer than I've made some of my other responses because I think this is what will resonate most with most of our listeners. Without giving geography away or names away, I can think of one practice, group practice in particular, in my field in orthodontics, where it was lacking in every aspect of what we've discussed here. Clinical oversight, which again is probably the most important because that's really what we deliver. Certainly culture, standardization, processes around hiring, processes around intake with patients, and so forth. This particular group had a turnover of approximately 40 to 45%. Now, I know some of the people listening can relate to this. It's happened to me in some of my practices. And in talking with the principals and understanding their vision and getting this all on paper, we understood that their current problem was also an opportunity to fix and to help them and to change things within 18 months. And that's a long time. But within 18 months, we did a few things. Number one, in this group practice, we turned around this entire 40, 45% turnover with docs. It was universal. On the doc side, it's single digit percentages. Amazing, because there's great stability. And those of you who own orthodontic practices, I think you know how sometimes unsettling it could be to patients and to parents if they see different clinicians constantly. And they're not clinicians that belong to that group, they're just people cycling in and out. That's number one. Number two, this is well below industry norms and industry averages. Number two, the turnover on the non clinical, meaning the non doc part of the staff, the admin and clinical support people, well below 20%. And I'm talking about over the course of the year. So think about what that does and the stability that that creates. Number three, the growth. This group went from having an existential crisis, potentially not surviving, to stabilizing, all in 18 months, to growing, and then ultimately to doubling their EBITDA to be somewhere in the threes, as in threes millions. And if you think about that change, that difference is a difference from the value of your group is effectively nothing, not even the debt that you might have on it, to you might be worth upwards of $35 million, maybe more, depending on the current multiples. And this group has created, and this will be actually instrumental in its next growth cycle, and next bite of the apple when they transact, because these docs are now committed. The staff is committed. They've all bought into the culture because they all live it. And not only will they transact beautifully, hopefully sometime no later than the earlier part of 2026, but they'll be set up beautifully as a foundation for that second, what's called colloquially the recap, for a second bite of the apple where everybody will do very well. That's the financial part, but they're going to enjoy that entire ride. And we overhauled them from admin to handbooks all the way through till the clinical parts with the docs. And that's just one small, relatively quick example, but there's tons of those, and there's tons of opportunities for those for our listeners and for everybody out there.
Well, and that really tells us, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, is we need proof that this works. And we know that it works. And that's a great example. And in talking with someone yesterday, he and I were talking about on the podcast that you've got to do it right from location one. So by standardizing every little piece of everything, like you said, this might seem incredibly boring, but the impact is simply tremendous. So thank you, Steve, for sharing that story with us. And thank you for sharing your firsthand experience with us today. I know those 4 processes have a million layers underneath them, but they're going to be valuable for our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me, Jamie. Thank you for the questions. And I agree. I think there's going to be tremendous value for all listening. And I'm here if anyone has any questions. You can feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. Well, we certainly appreciate your guidance and insights. So if you'd like to learn more about on-site clinical coaching and mentorship, because really we just got to the tip of the iceberg here today, or if you'd like to talk about any of Polaris expert advisory services, or maybe there's a topic we haven't covered that you want to hear about, please send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, or you can always reach us by visiting the website at polarishealthcarepartners.com. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.